From our epistle reading this morning, Christ has appeared once for all at the end of the age to remove sin by the sacrifice of himself. It was a typical weekday afternoon about 15 years ago. I was riding the subway. The train was crowded, all the seats were taken. And at one of the stops, an older woman, maybe in her mid to late 70s, pushed herself onto the crowded train. She struggled to get on. Another woman was sitting in a seat by the door. She was younger, I would say mid-40s. And she waved her hand to catch the attention of the older woman. And then she stood to give up her seat. And then the older woman, in a tone of righteous indignation, and in a voice loud enough for the entire train to hear, said, "Are you kidding? You're as old as the hills, lady." She held up her hands. "You keep the seat." I think we can understand the older woman's reaction. Every gift or favor has a kind of double edge. Now, receiving a gift is a wonderful thing, but then it creates an obligation to repay that gift that is maybe not as wonderful. As the psychologist Robert Cialdini notes, humans have a deep-seated need to reciprocate, that is, to repay in kind what someone else has provided for us. If a woman does us a favor, he writes, we should do one in return. If a man sends us a birthday present, we should remember his birthday with a gift of ours. If a couple invites us to a party, we should be sure to invite them to one of ours. Even a very small gift or favor, like the offer of a subway seat, can create this obligation. And I think the older woman didn't want to feel indebted, even in a small way, to the younger woman. She didn't want her pity. She didn't want her seat. Instead, the older woman preferred, literally, to stand on her own 2 feet. That's a very common human desire. And in our epistle reading today, instead of a subway seat, we are offered a much greater gift, the sacrifice of Christ for the removal of sin. Christ has appeared once for all at the end of the age to remove sin by the sacrifice of himself. Our deep-seated need to reciprocate, though, does not go away just because the giver is God. And so the question arises, does accepting this gift of God pull us into a cycle of reciprocation? Are we going to owe Jesus something if we accept his self-offering made on our behalf to remove sin? Karl Marx famously refused to be indebted to God. In one of his early writings, the economic and philosophical manuscripts, when he was still in his 20s, and which was unpublished in his lifetime, Marx wrote that a being only counts as independent when it stands on its own feet. And it stands on its own feet as long as it owes its existence to itself. And for Marx, humans could do this. Humans could stand on their own feet without any help from God, because Marx saw history as nothing but the creation of people by human labor and the development of nature for people. Therefore, people have the observable and irrefutable proof, he said, of their own self-creation. And the question of some kind of alien being standing above or apart from people has become impossible in practice. In other words, for Marx, since everything is materialist, God is impossible, humans are self-created and are thus independent. We stand alone. And we don't have to be a Marxist to want to resist this pull of reciprocation, especially when it's used to manipulate us. I'm old enough to remember the Hare Krishna soliciting donations at LAX. It was in the 1980s when my parents would take our family to vacation. Robert Cialdini analyzes their fundraising strategy in his book Influence. The Hare Krishna did not ask you for a donation at first. No, the first thing they always did was to offer you a gift. Sometimes it was a little book, more often a flower. And no matter how much an airport traveler might hold up the hands to refuse the gift, they would be insistent. They would press the gift into the hand. And only after the gift was given would a donation then be requested. And by that point, the need to reciprocate is so strong that the traveler would often feel guilty to give a little money. And so whenever my parents saw the Hare Krishna at Los Angeles airport, they would always walk very quickly past, and they would not slow down. They would not allow us to slow down so we could avoid being given this gift. Sometimes they would even hold their hands up in anticipation as they quickly walked by, as if to say, no, you keep it. But there is something different that happens when the giver of the gift is God. When the giver of God is God, this mechanism of reciprocation, of receiving a gift and then having to repay that gift, it breaks down. And it breaks down for this simple reason. It breaks down because everything already belongs to God. When God is the giver, there is nothing we can give back to God that doesn't already belong to God. And therefore, God's gift operates outside any system of reciprocation. In the words of the Orthodox theologian David Bentley Hart, the sacrifice that Christian theology upholds is inseparable from the gift. It underwrites a destabilizing extravagance of giving and then giving again, of declaring love and delight in the exchange of signs of peace, outside of every calculation of debt or power. Did you catch that? Jesus' gift of Jesus is outside of every calculation of gift or power. That is how he gives us Jesus on the cross. And so we don't have to hold up our hands to this gift. We don't have to walk quickly past it. We just have to open our hands and accept it.